Welcome to the EXP Group, one of the leading providers of business training solutions. Please enjoy this presentation and visit us on the web at www.theexpgroup.com for more information.
Hello and welcome to today's EXP training video for ACCA Paper P3 Business Analysis. Now, in today's video, we're going to be looking at page 21, which is in chapter 4 of your Express Notes, which can be downloaded free of charge from our website at www.theexpgroup.com. So what we're looking at today is something called stakeholder mapping. First question, though, is what do we mean by this term stakeholder? Well, stakeholders are people with an interest in the organisation, people who are interested in the organisation. Maybe a slightly more formal definition here. Stakeholders are individuals, groups or organisations that can impact or be impacted by an organisation. Okay, so this is really one of the first things that an organisation should do, is to analyse the stakeholders to see what they want and see how much they should listen to them. So if we go back to some of the earlier videos we looked at, and for example the rational model, remember the rational model, the first stage of the rational model was analysis. We then had analysis followed by choice followed by implementation. If we're looking within the analysis stage, then really one of the first things we should be asking ourselves is who are our stakeholders and who are our key stakeholders. Now, what we're going to be looking at here, Mendel Ohs Matrix. Mendel Ohs Matrix is a technique for mapping or identifying which stakeholders are important and what we should do with those particular stakeholders. It maps it according to a matrix of their interest in a business and their power in that business. Okay. Now, some of you may have heard Mendel Ohs Matrix referred to as Johnson and Scholes Matrix. It was in fact Mendel that came up with this idea to start with, and Johnson and Scholes expanded it and referred to it at a later stage. It doesn't really matter whether you refer to it as Mendel Ohs Matrix or Johnson and Scholes. I would probably go for the Mendel Ohs Matrix one. Okay, so let's have a quick look at this in more detail. So stakeholder mapping is saying, look, Mendel Ohs Matrix allocates stakeholders into quadrants according to the level of power and how likely they are to exercise that power. In other words, their interest. So if we look at the matrix at the bottom of page 21, we've got stakeholder interest and stakeholder power. Stakeholder interest, stakeholder power. Let's look at each of these quadrants in turn. So if we have a low level of interest, so a stakeholder in the business has a low level of interest, so they're not really interested in that business or organisation, and they have a low level of power. So we have a low and low on Mendel Ohs Matrix. What do? Well, according to Mendel Ohs, the technical term is minimum effort. In other words, we don't do a great deal. So if we take a step back, when management are looking at deciding what direction the company are going to go in, if there are stakeholders who are within the low and low quadrant of Mendel Ohs Matrix, then to a certain extent they're kind of ignored, or there's minimal effort undertaken. Okay, what about we have stakeholders who have a low level of interest but a high level of power. So a low level of interest and a high level of power, what should we do? Well, they've got a high level of power, so they could vent that power if they wanted to, but there's a low level of interest. So what management should try to do is make sure they're kept happy. So within this quadrant of low level of interest, high level of power, we want to keep them satisfied, keep them happy. As long as they are happy, then they're not going to want to get too interested in it. And on the next video, I will be running through a couple of examples of stakeholder mapping for some companies. Let's carry on with Mendel Ohs Matrix here then. So, if we've got stakeholders with a high level of interest but a low level of power, high level of interest, low level of power, what should we do? Mendel Ohs' argument was that because there's a low level of power, we don't really have to change the direction the business is going to keep these guys happy because they don't have a lot of power. However, because they've got a high level of interest, they're very interested in the company, interested in the organization. So what we should do, what the company should do, is keep informed. They should keep them informed. Not necessarily change direction or anything like that in terms of where the organization is going, but instead keep them informed on a regular basis. The final quadrant we'll look at is where there is a high level of interest and a high level of power. Now, according to Mendel Ohs and Mendel Ohs Matrix, it's these guys which are the key players. So when an organization is analyzing matters and deciding what strategy to approach, the key people it should be taking account of are the stakeholders that fall within the high level of interest and the high level of power. Okay, so that's a quick overview of the theory behind Mendel Ohs Matrix and stakeholders. What we are going to do in tomorrow's video is run through Mendel Ohs Matrix with a couple of actual examples.